Baseball isn't just numbers, numbers, numbers.
This game is not being played on computers.
You don't do that with a bunch of statistical gimmicks.
You don't put a team together with a computer.
We're talking weighted runs created plus,
expected WOBA,
his sweet spot rate,
defensive runs above average,
average exit velocity,
barrel rate,
xFIP,
BABIP,
SIERA.
We are above replacement radio. And welcome to Above Replacement Radio, where we're talking baseball kind of whenever. I'm your host, Chris Gianta. Over there on the other side of the screen is Daniel Curran. How you doing, Daniel?
Chris, I'm doing very well today. We have reached March 9th, 2024. We are less than 3 weeks away from opening day. Baseball is truly coming soon. Like, it really feels like the start of the season is actually in the coming weeks and days. Spring training is... We're all at the point where we're sick of spring training, which is good because you don't have those people that are fake being excited about it anymore. And yeah, I mean, we are just about ready for another baseball season at Above Replacement Radio. In part season 5, fully season 4, or no, fully season 5, in part season 6. Oh my God.
Yeah.
We're old.
Yeah, it's March 9th, so baseball is coming around the corner, not January 25th. That's not when we think baseball is around the corner, because opening day is March 20th. Technically, but the opening day in the traditional sense is, I think, the 26th. It's a
28th.
28th. It's a Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when the excitement will really start to amplify. But regardless, we do have 2 division previews left. We're knocking one of them out today, but before all that, we do have a little bit of news to get into. The Phillies have re-signed their other ace. They already signed Aaron Nola to a 7-year deal over the very, very early in the offseason, and they just extended Zack Wheeler for 3 years, $126 million. What'd you think of this move by the Phillies?
Yeah, I was shook at the AAV, as I'm sure many other people were. I was driving to work on, I believe it was Monday morning, when I had my phone set up on that little mount thing that you have, in your car. And I got the notification from, I believe it was Heyman First, that said, Wheeler extension with the Phillies, 3-year deal. The AAV and the money hadn't been revealed yet. My guess was around the same deal that the free agents recently got, guys like Cody Bellinger, guys like who's the other guy that recently, Matt Chapman, a little more than that maybe, but Zack Wheeler is going into his age 34 season, I think.
I think so.
Yeah, his age 34 season. So I figured if this extension starts next year and starts at age 35, it makes sense. I was not expecting 40 mil a year, though. The most AAV, I believe, ever in a contract. Is that correct?
I heard that, but then I also thought about Max Scherzer got 3 and 130, but I think because there were opt-outs or something like that, that it technically didn't count. But regardless, it is still a very high amount of money for sure.
I keep thinking back to this moment. I believe it was in 2021. When John Middleton, the owner of the Phillies, said something that he didn't have X number of dollars to make X moves. I'm not I've tried looking up the articles for it. I just can't find them. I'm not crazy for not remembering that correctly, right? That was the thing that happened. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember that. It was a month or 2 before they signed Real Muto again.
Yes, it was. Yeah, it was because it was soon after the Harper deal had started. I need to find this somewhere, but I know for a fact John Middleton said something to that degree a few years ago.
Yeah,
and he said, and he had a very good quote in spring training last year where he said, "I don't care how high the payroll goes, I just want to win," which is. That's the quote that all 30 owners should have. It shouldn't be a national headline when one owner says that, but that's what Major League Baseball has become. And John Middleton, since that has very much turned himself around, right? I think he had already signed Wheeler by the time he had said that, but he has since signed Trey Turner to an 11-year deal worth $300 million in total dollar value. He's re-signed Aaron Nola to a 7-year, $172 million contract. He's re-signed Real Muto. He's signed Castellanos, signed Schwarber, signed Taiwan Walker, just to name a few. Those are the big ones at least. So, yeah, I mean, you gotta respect a team that uh throws all the money in and doesn't really care, because that's what the Phillies are doing. And I mean, they went to the World Series 2 years ago. They almost went to the World Series last year, and it even feels like that felt like the start of their window. This is where we have, even with the division they're in, World Series or bust type of expectations for a team like this, not just in this year, but in this championship window.
Right, yeah. And yeah, I mean, you definitely good on the Phillies for spending and also not following the trends of the other teams this offseason. But but yeah, like with all the deals they've signed, they've set themselves up pretty well. And those worlds, these past couple, deep postseason runs would not have been possible without those deals. So, it's good on the Phillies for spending for sure. And yeah, in regards to the Wheeler deal, like people might kind of ooh and ah at the $42 million a year, but I find it to be very similar to when Max Scherzer got signed for 3 years and $130 million for the Mets when he was even older. And like, thing about Zack Wheeler right now is he really seen that differently than Max Scherzer was at that point. I don't
To
really
be
think
honest,
so.
I think there's a case he's better.
Yeah, there might be a case there, but like looking at Zack Wheeler over these last 3 years, it's a 3.08 ERA and a 2.86 FIP. And going back to last postseason, was there really anybody that you felt more comfortable with on the mound as a starting pitcher than Zack Wheeler? I don't think anyone can confidently say yes. So that's the type of guy that you give, over $40 million a year for. He was listed as your number one pitcher. He was listed as my number two, and that might even be a hot take. I'm certain that my number one was definitely a hot take, but nonetheless, like he's kind of a consensus top three pitcher in the game, and on a lot of people's lists, he's the best pitcher in the game. So he got best pitcher in the game money, and he's well earned that. He's been good. Ever since he put on the Phillies uniform, and not good, he's been great since he put on the Phillies uniform, both in the regular season and the postseason.
Yeah, I mean, I think the 5-year deal that Zack Wheeler signed with the Phillies going into the 2020 season has to be one of the best starting pitcher contracts ever signed. I mean, people talked about Max Scherzer with the Nationals as like the prototypical great pitcher contract, but Zack Wheeler, given the expectation that he had, a lot of people looked at that dollar value and thought, wow, that much for Zack Wheeler. And I don't think anyone could have imagined this level of success going into year 5, to where we're talking about $40 million a year before he even hits free agency. The Phillies wouldn't even let it happen. So good on the Phillies for keeping their guy. I mean, I know that like there has been a lot of talk about next year's free agent starting pitcher market. I think it gets massively deflated with this news. It's Max Fried, Walker Bueller, um, and a couple other guys at this point.
Yeah, maybe maybe Max Fried gets paid a few extra bucks. Maybe
It
he'll get
sounds
a
like he's leaving.
yeah, which
He probably already declined the 7-year $80 million contract offer.
yes, he they wanted 2% going to the Braves Foundation
Yeah.
because they
Okay. So Corbin Burns died. I forgot about him. Shane Bieber, Corbin Burns, Garrett Cole, if he opts out, I'm gonna assume he doesn't. I don't
no.
think. Yeah, I don't think he does. Um, Jack Flaherty was a cool name for a while. Unfortunately, he's not anymore. Max Fried, like I mentioned earlier. Um, Clayton Kershaw, obviously, but he's been a free agent several times now. Um, Freddie Peralta, except they're probably going to take that 8-year club option. Serger, again, he's a free agent. Um, yeah, Verlander has a player option, so I would imagine that's going to get taken
Yeah,
at that AAV.
just a random thought. They really should do that Clayton Kershaw 1 year deal with the Dodgers on February 2nd to really match things up. for Groundhog Day because it just happened. It just seems to happen every year. Um,
Yeah.
I really think they should. I really think they should make that a tradition until he retires. No matter what the dollar value is, it's just going to be a 1 year deal with the Dodgers.
Yep.
Um, although I think this year there might be an option attached to it because I think
There is
there's a multi-year potential.
a player option.
Um,
So,
yeah, right.
which
But yeah, with Zack Wheeler, like I mentioned the numbers over the last 3 years, but also like all of his postseason experience is with the Phillies, and he has a 2.42 ERA and 63 and a third innings pitched. I mean, fantastic peripherals as well. I'll have to go to the game
I
logs
got
to
it. I got it pulled up right here. In the 2023 postseason, Zack Wheeler, first of all, he made 4 starts, excuse me, pitched through 6 innings in all of them, which like that alone says everything you really need to know because a lot of starting pitchers don't go deep into postseason games anymore. He had a 1.95 ERA, a 2.46 FIP. Um, just excellent starter all around. 3 home runs given up, 35 strikeouts, 3 walks in 27 and 2/3 innings pitched.
Yeah, and over these 2 years, a 2.72 FIP in the postseason as well. Like, yeah, there's he's been absolutely tremendous. So like that's the type of guy that you give $40 million a year to. And I don't think like people I think people who might be questioning it are not really thinking that through. Like there was really not anybody that you wanted out there more than Zack Wheeler in the postseason. And it's that's not even like talking the cliches like, oh, he's a big game pitcher. Like he's an every game pitcher. He just happened to also be in the playoffs. Um
Yeah,
so so yeah, happy for the Phillies. And yeah, they're able to sustain their roster and keep the championship window open for even longer. Because yeah, I
yeah.
mean now I don't think they really have too many big like free agents coming up. Like Schwarber, I know Schwarber has like 2 more years, Castellanos 3 more years, Trey Turner's there
Uh,
forever. Real Muto might be, I don't know,
not
couple.
even not even really like any of their arbitration guys. Like Jeff Hoffman's their only free agent for next year coming out of arbitration.
Right, right. So yeah, I expect more good things from the Phillies this upcoming year. Um, but Wheeler was going to be there either way. But yeah, anything more on the Wheeler deal?
No, I think that's pretty much everything, I guess, right? Yeah, heck of a job. Sign him to the year $118 million contract. He was worth probably double that during the first 4 years at least. Something that we've learned the hard way as Red Sox fans in the last week is that, there are no guarantees that anyone stays healthy, no matter what. And it's weird because it's like, oh, you don't sign pitching because guys get hurt, but also you need pitching because guys get hurt. So there is this kind of weird imbalance with how people view signing pitchers to long-term deals, especially guys, that are going into their late 30s. But Zack Wheeler, 213 innings pitched in 2021, 153 in 2022, 192 in 2023. With the injury history that he had with the Mets and going into that contract, like they've gotten exactly what they wanted out of him and probably a lot more as well.
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, we may both be talking about him in the 20 through 11 here for uh for
Yep.
players, unless he's in the top 10 because he's definitely still yet to be talked about. But yeah, so any more news that we want to get into before we get into previews?
Yeah, we can just touch on this, but I did want to mention the new renderings for the Oakland A's ballpark. We are about to talk about the Oakland A's or the Las Vegas A's, the Aviators, whatever they're gonna go by. I don't really know what's going on there. Uh, Anyone who's followed this entire process knows how terribly it's gone and how bad it's looked for ownership. You had the mayor of Vegas saying they should stay in Oakland. You've had meetings held at with the city of Oakland and the A's, basically begging them to let them back in to extend the lease for a couple of years before they leave. they don't really have a home beyond this year. Uh, it's been a whole fiasco. Yeah, again, like I mentioned, the A's lease at the Coliseum ends in a year, and we don't know where they're going to be playing their home games between 2025 to 27. It might be in Salt Lake, it might be in Sacramento. We have no idea where they are playing. The worst case scenario is that they are probably playing in Vegas in that $8,000 or 8,000 seat ballpark that they didn't even sell out last night when they played a spring training game there. But we got new we got a new rendering for a ballpark that looks like the Sydney Opera House. Um, and I was just so amused by this picture. One, because like the A's have put out so many different renderings for ballparks, whether it be in Vegas, whether it be in Oakland, the Howard Terminal ballpark that everyone wanted to get done. All of them look super futuristic. I would put every dollar I have that it looks nothing that cool at all. Um, First of all, just looking at this ballpark in particular, um, it doesn't have bullpens. So the A's, who had by every metric the worst starting rotation in all of baseball last year, seems to have a lot of faith that by the year 2028 they will have figured out that problem to the degree of not even needing relievers. So that's pretty big. Um, the dugouts have these like open steps that don't have like a rail to them. It looks uh very like old timey, which I think is very funny. There's not a lot of foul territory, um, which the Coliseum has a lot of foul territory, so they're going from a lot to a little. That's interesting. The scoreboard is the funniest looking thing I've ever seen, and it's definitely not. Uh, it definitely looks very weird, and I don't think it's gonna happen like that. Doesn't have so I guess they are assuming they're going to be playing only day games in a city that uh is 100 degrees during the day throughout the summer. So that's definitely an interesting choice. Um, and also if you look at the fans in this image, you could tell that some of this, or at least maybe even all of this, is AI generated because there are jerseys with not real letters on the back of them. There are people with more than five fingers. There are random flags people are waving that don't have logos on them. They're just colors. Also, Mike Mustafa, 2028 Angels lineup. He'll be 40 years old by that point. Um, the more you look at the image, the funnier it gets. And it's just, I think it's very funny because I've never seen something that I'm more confident is not happening than this stadium.
My only retraction is maybe they have the Wrigley underground bullpens or under the
Yeah,
bleacher bullpens, which I doubt that. Um,
no, I don't see where the entrance to it would be. Like
yeah, that's
if you look at the image, it's just a plain wall, and then there's like a little club looking area out in left field, kind of similar to what the Marlins have.
yeah, maybe the strategy is like, you know, when they won the first A's dynasty, 1910 to 1913, you had Charles Chief Bender, you had Eddie Plank. They didn't need relievers. They were going out there, they were getting CGs left and right, CG SHOs left and right. You don't need that, and if you don't need that, then no need to give your oppositions a bullpen either, because like let's make things fair. We're not going to have a bullpen, then you're not going to have a bullpen, so
Mhm.
we're going to make your guys throw CGs, even though we plan on getting that pitch count for like 200, 250. Like, you know if you're gonna have a reliever, he better be getting warm like in the dugout or something, because yeah.
Yeah, imagine JP Sears seeing this rendering, realizing they're gonna need him to throw 400 innings a year.
Yeah, it might be tough for
Like,
sure.
okay, I got 5 years to start training, 4 years to train for this. It's insane workload. That
Or
is definitely gonna pop my arm off at some point.
I mean, you're designated like 12 pitchers, so maybe you have like a 12-man staff and you just
Yeah.
rotate every 12 days.
Maybe they each throw like 4.5 innings,
I
and
guess.
it's a
But
6-man rotation, sort of,
yeah, but maybe they'll warm up like on
in
the
the parking lot.
yeah, in the park, because there's no really foul territory, so you can't even do that.
Yeah, no.
Like
It doesn't have one of those like little side bullpens that you see at like Tampa or Oak or the Coliseum for that matter.
yeah, or even like in middle school, high school days. Like sometimes you would just go off to the side of
Hmm.
the field, but it doesn't seem like there's much foul territory to
No,
go into.
no.
So yeah, who knows? Maybe somewhere on the concourse
Yeah, I
that'll go
guess. I
down.
mean, yeah, no one will be there, so you'll
Yeah,
have
that's
plenty of
true.
room.
And
Yeah.
if they do see you, they probably will not haggle you for an autograph. You're probably not very well known.
I would say they're not gonna try to interrupt you. They'll be like, "Oh, a couple fans just throwing. Okay, interesting."
Yeah, yeah.
It's like, no,
Um,
dude, that's Paul Blackburn.
yeah. Um,
You don't understand. It's a 2022 All-Star.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, who could forget when he had like a sub 3 ERA through 10 starts? He's pretty good.
Yeah,
Um,
I don't know. I think it's been so depressing to watch from an outside perspective how this has all gone down. But it is very amusing to watch things that you know are gonna flop. Like, yeah, I don't know. John Fisher has not made himself look very good for the last year with this attempted move with, literally Vegas not showing really any interest in them, even their own mayor being like, yeah, like it's cool that they're coming, but they should also just probably try to stay in Oakland.
yeah. It's also something that everyone's rooting against. So in order
Hmm.
to sort of have any retraction to that, you need to have to come up with a good plan, and there's really been no evidence of that so far.
No, like they've thrown together like, hey, this place we could do. Like you got this. Like they went into Vegas not knowing and not having any plan on where they were going to put this ballpark, what kind of room they were going to have. Like, I don't think they did much market research. I think they just saw the Golden Knights and the Raiders, which, by the way, like, Raiders games are always filled with opposing fans. And the Knights, okay, they do draw a large crowd. I think they have like some of the highest attendance in the NHL. But there's two things you got to consider. One, they win. They won the championship last year. They spend, and also like it's their team. Like I feel like Vegas wants a team that is theirs, not a team that is someone else's that's coming to them. Like I think that's a large part of why the Raiders don't draw home fans the same way that the Knights do.
Yeah, exactly. Vegas was an expansion team. Helped out that they went to the Stanley Cup final in their first year of
Oh, it
existence.
absolutely did.
That was the craziest thing. But yeah, like yeah, it's hard for a city to adopt something rather than like root for a team that was, born there.
Like
Um,
if John Fisher moves the team to Vegas and I'm assuming he's gonna start spending like he's a big market owner or at least a mid-tier market owner and not, the poor old Oakland A's when he's in Vegas. But like the city of Vegas isn't gonna commit to a team that is running themselves like the Oakland A's because there are so many other things to do in Vegas. Why would you spend your Wednesday night at a 30,000 seat baseball stadium to watch your 56 win team for the seventh
yeah,
straight year in a row
yeah, for sure, for sure. So
that has, a payroll of 8 digits?
yeah, yeah. So yeah, we'll keep tabs on this. See if there's any good news on the move to Las Vegas side. We've yet to really see too much of it.
I mean, the good
Um,
news would be it's not happening.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Um, yeah, so we'll see how this continues. Anything more on this before we get into previews?
No, I think we can get into it.
All right, so yeah, our second to last. Here it is the AL West. We had there were two postseason teams coming out of it last year, a World Series champion, almost three postseason teams, but one team was one game out, I think exactly. Um, and yeah, we start with those Oakland Athletics for now, who last year went 50 and 112 and finished last in the AL West. As far as subtractions, they lost Tony Kemp and Trevor May, and they added Alex Wood, Ross Stripling, Scott Alexander, Abraham Toro, and Miguel Andujar. Who is your Athletics player to watch?
Yeah, I don't know how you can like be an A's fan right now because it's such a weird vibe where it might be your last season with a team, but we don't really know if it actually is or not, which is not because of the team, it's because of how bad the owner has been. but also like, you can't even really take this last season to try to enjoy it because they're built to lose as much as possible. And yeah, I mean, looking up and down this depth chart, it is a very difficult thing to see, but there is some interestingness, I would say, in Mason Miller, who is my player to watch. He is their top ranked prospect on pretty much every site. But I think there is still a lot to be interested in with him. He pitched 33 and a third innings last year. Unfortunately, he did have an injury which sidelined him for a while. And in that time, he had a 3.78 ERA, a 3.18 FIP, or a 3.18 xERA, and a 3.47 FIP. He excelled with a 185 opponent's expected batting average, a 27.3% strikeout rate, a 3.7 barrel rate against, a 34.1% hard hit rate against, and a 93.8 mile per hour average fastball velocity with 66th percentile extension. So not only was he throwing that thing hard, but he was getting that perceived velocity because he was getting far off the mound when he threw it. So the thing that interests me about Mason Miller was that he was a huge fly ball pitcher. I believe he had a 25% ground ball rate, which would have been first percentile if he qualified, but 24.4% of his batted balls allowed in total were pulled. That was the sixth lowest rate among the 576 pitchers with at least 50 batted balls allowed. Miller had a 34.4% fly ball rate in 2023, and 50% of his fly balls went to the opposite field. And on those fly balls to the opposite field, opponents hit 143. They had an expected batting average of 089. They slugged 429 with an expected slugging of 256. So they did not do well, and they weren't even supposed to do well. They did actually better than they should have. 17.1% of his total batted balls were fly balls to the opposite field, the ninth highest rate on the aforementioned list of 576 pitchers. 17.9% of his total fly balls or sorry, wait. Yeah, okay, 17.9% of his total fly balls were pulled, which is a very low percent. Against his slider, which was his secondary pitch, opponents hit 118 with a 131 expected batting average. They slugged 147 with a 178 expected slugging. It had a 47.1% whiff rate and a 17.6% hard hit rate. So Mason Miller had excellent pitches in his fastball and in his slider. I would like to see him throw the fastball a little less often. He threw it 55% of the time last year, so I would like to see him cut down on that just a tad bit, because I don't think that home run to fly ball ratio is going to be quite sustainable. Unless he, does the same thing with his batted ball locations, which is very tough to follow up. I've also seen some reports that the A's are using him as kind of a starter reliever hybrid, maybe like a long reliever type. So I'm interested to see what kind of innings he gets and how he's able to utilize those.
Right. Yeah, yeah. And yeah, for the second time we are doubling up on
Yeah, I figured because who else?
yeah. Yeah, I mean yeah, shout out to cuz I maybe they seem more obvious to us, but to other people it might not be as obvious, but like shout out to Ryan Noda who like had a
Mhm.
really interesting year last year. I think a 121 OPS plus or something like that. So um
High walk rate.
very high walk rate for sure. Um, and oh yeah, Brent Rooker had a great year as well. So like yeah, there's some interesting guys, but yeah, Mason Miller definitely intrigued me the most. Because yeah, I think there's some untapped things or like some things that um things that point to him being a good pitcher for the future. He is a 25-year-old, 25-year-old right-handed pitcher. He had 6 starts last year in 10 appearances. So yeah, it does seem to fit that hybrid, starter reliever role. I'd hope to see more starter innings because it's like it's the A's. Like what's there to what's there to do here? Like who's getting starts instead of him? But regarding Mason Miller in 33 and a third innings pitch last year, as you mentioned, a 27% strikeout rate and 3.18 expected ERA, both very, very good. Also a 15% pop-up rate, and out of 574 pitchers with 50 plus batted balls last year, his pop-up rate was 13th highest, which is top 3% in the league. Part of this has to do with that amazing fastball that you just mentioned. His four-seam fastball averaged 98.3 miles per hour, which was in the 97th percentile in all of baseball. which that could play a big role, especially if he's a starter. Not a lot of starters have that type of gas. Also, his slider was his best pitch, as you mentioned, a 118 average and a 147 slugging off of it with a 47% whiff rate. And out of 337 pitchers with 50 plus swings against sliders, his whiff rate on his slider was 25th, which is top 8%. And out of 351 pitchers with 100 plus sliders thrown, his average against it was 18th lowest, and his slugging against it was 8th lowest. So top 10 slider results in terms of slugging out of 351. Part of that has to do with the amount of movement and velocity that slider has. His slider was 3.7 had 3.7 more inches of average vertical movement than average, and 3.8 more inches of horizontal movement than average, while also being 0.7 miles per hour faster than league average. So it's moving more up and down. It's moving down more, it's moving away more, or closer to you more if you're a lefty, and it's also going faster. So that's why it got as good of results as it did. So yeah, Mason Miller, he's pretty exciting. Hope to see more innings out of him, and hope to see some more success out of him. So yeah, on to questions.
Yeah, this question's so depressing, but I couldn't
Okay,
think of anything else. Who will strike out more batters, Alex Wood or Ross Stripling?
that's a good question.
Does it
Yeah,
matter at all? Absolutely not. Will it play any interesting role in the development of the team or their future careers? No.
I I gotta look at both these gentlemen.
So I believe Fangraphs has them projected to throw this exact same number of innings, with one of them having like 4 more strikeouts than the other.
Okay. Yeah, I'll go. Um, I feel like Alex Wood has had maybe less bouts with injury. Um, I feel like Ross Stripling's innings production has just been more inconsistent, so I'll go with Alex Wood. Why
All
not?
right.
My question is, buy or sell, Ryan Noda will be at 99th percentile or higher in walk rate. I think he was,
What was he last year?
I believe, 98th.
98th. I'm gonna sell on that. I mean, 99th percentile is so good. There's also just nothing you can really bank on with this team. Like, I don't know how many play appearances he's gonna get, if he's gonna qualify, what that's gonna look like. But 15.6% is so hard to follow up. Um, yeah, I'm gonna sell on that.
All right, all right. And now we move on to the Angels, who, yeah, they were a roller coaster ride as always last year. Yeah, always, did not escape the headlines. But they ended up going 73 and 89 and finished fourth in the American League West. They lost Shohei Ohtani of most notably. Also lost Max Stassi, David Fletcher, CJ Crone, Aaron Loop, Randall Grichuk, Gio Urshela, Mike Moustakas, and Eduardo Escobar. And they
Forgot they had
added
gotten CJ Crone back.
oh, they re-signed him.
Well, no, because he was on the team in like the mid
Oh,
2010s. I
oh,
forgot they had gotten him back.
yeah, right.
Like he was on
Um,
their team again.
and then in terms of additions, they added Robert Stevenson, which is a pretty good signing, along with Aaron Hicks, Luis Garcia of the reliever form, and Hunter Dozier uh and Adam Simber. I believe that's yeah, I believe it's the reliever Luis Garcia.
It
Um,
is.
but
Well, it's
yeah,
definitely not
so
the starter because he has Tommy John, and it's not the second baseman.
okay. So I'll open with my Angels player to watch, which is my 2023 Angels player to watch. And I'm doubling down because he did really well. It's just he didn't get a lot of playing time because he got injured. So he's about as like known or unknown as he was at this point last year. So I figured I would talk about him again because he did really well in the limited time that he did have. That was his age 23 season, and he hit 236 and slugged 500 for a
You
seven.
didn't. You didn't even say his name. I know who you're talking about.
Oh yeah, Logan O'Hoppe. Logan O'Hoppe of the Los Angeles Angels. Um, who they got in the Brandon Marsh trade, if I'm not mistaken.
Mhm.
He hit 236 and slugged 500 for a 796 OPS, and he matched his slugging with a 500 expected slugging. So it was exactly the same. He got the results that he should have gotten. He had a 16% barrel rate, and out of 402 hitters with 100 plus batted balls last year, he was 26th in barrel rate, which is top 7%. Also very cool about Logan O'Hoppe. He pulled the ball a lot last year. He had a 55% pull rate, which was fourth highest out of 402. He also pulled 46% of his fly balls, which was 11th highest out of 403, and he slugged 2611 on pulled fly balls last year. So that ended up in some very good results. So, yeah, almost an 800 OPS last year from the catcher position. He's heading into his age 24 season. So, if there is anybody to be excited about on the Angels, I think it is Logan O'Hoppe. Along with I get, obviously Mike Trout, but as far as guys who are not very well known, it is Logan O'Hoppe. Who is your Angels player to watch?
Yeah, the hopes that somehow, some way, we go an entire division all repeating is still alive, because I am also taking Logan O'Hoppe. I really have nothing to add that you already said. Um, But yeah, in just short of 200 plate appearances last year because of a torn labrum, he slugged 500 with an expected slugging of 500. So I mean, he slugged exactly the way he should have. Chris, you did oversell him a bit. He pulled 54.8% of his batted balls, not 55%. But to be fair, you also did uh sell him a little short. 46.2% of his fly balls were pulled, but we have pretty much the same idea here. Yeah, that pull rate was the fourth highest among the 403 hitters with at least 100 batted balls. And he also, like I mentioned, had a 28.5% fly ball rate with 46% of those fly balls being pulled. Overall, he had a pulled fly ball rate of 13.3%, the 16th highest on that same list of 403. He put up a 90.5 mile per hour average exit velocity and a 15.6% barrel rate. It also had a 236 batting average with a 257 expected batting average. So, he did get a little unlucky in that department there. Before his injury, he had an average exit velocity of 93.1 miles per hour, which was 27th among the 282 hitters with at least 25 batted balls in that time span. And from September 1st through the end of last season, he had a 20.9% barrel rate, which was the fifth highest among the 195 hitters with at least 50 batted balls in that span. So Logan O'Hoppe started strong. In some ways, he ended strong. I mean, on a results basis, he didn't really end strong, but he was hitting the ball very well. Um, and yeah, he is also my player to watch. So we are 2 for 2 so far in the AL West.
Yeah. We were riding hot for a little bit. I think the first 12 or 13
Hmm.
teams we did not have a repeat, but yeah, I think it's catching up to us right now. Um
Hmm.
but yeah, on to questions where my question is who will lead this pitching staff in B War?
In B War, so we're talking about ERA plus.
Correct.
We don't give a shit about strikeouts or walks or home runs allowed. We do not care. Um, yeah, so you got what? Reed Detmers at the top of the rotation who didn't really take a step forward last year. Tyler Anderson coming off a disappointing first year of his contract. Griffin Canning actually looked sort of interesting last year. Patrick Sandoval and Chase Silseth in this rotation. Any other potential guys?
Is
No.
Sandoval injured or something?
No. Who?
Patrick Sandoval.
No, I mentioned him.
Oh, okay. Wait,
Uh,
wait in here.
I'm gonna go with either Sandoval or Detmers, depending on, I guess, innings pitched, right? But I feel more confident in Patrick Sandoval's ability to go deeper into starts. Uh, but Reed Detmers also has, I think, more upside. It just depends on whether it's gonna come this year or not. I don't really know. But I will go in B War. I'll go with Detmers. I think there's still a step forward that could be taken. We saw it not even during the span that he threw his no-hitter in 2022, but that year he had a 3.77 ERA in 129 innings pitched. Um, Last year his strikeout rate did go up, but it also his home run rate went up pretty substantially. His walk rate ticked up a bit. Um, yeah, I'll go with Reed Detmers.
Yeah,
My question, I went with a more meme pick here for my question. Who will log more plate appearances for this team, Anthony Rendon or the Angels 2024 first round draft pick?
that is
I
a
believe
solid
Rendon
question.
did beat out Nolan Schanuel last season, but not by much.
Yeah,
By
yeah.
like 10 games worth of plate appearances.
Just going by odds, I will have to go with Anthony Rendon. However, I'm not rooting for that result.
Yeah.
I'm rooting for,
Seaver King.
yeah, some some kid from the ACC
Yeah.
to eclipse Anthony Rendon this year.
Yep.
Um, yeah, that's a very good question. So yeah, now on to the good teams in the American League West. We start off here with the Mariners, who went 88 and 74 last year and finished third in the AL West. They missed the playoffs by one game. They lost Eugenio Suarez, Teoscar Hernandez, Jared Kelenic, Robbie Ray, Jose Caballero, Justin Topa, and Marco Gonzalez, and they added Mitch Garver, Jorge Polanco, Luke Raley, Gregory Santos, and Sebi Zavala. Who is your Mariners player to watch?
Yeah, it is very hard to evaluate if the Mariners got better or not this offseason, but I think there are some guys that are interesting. My player to watch is not even in the Fangraphs projected opening day lineup. Chris, we agreed on Mason Miller. We agreed on Logan O'Hoppe. I would be very surprised if you have Dominic Canzone as your Mariners player to watch.
Yeah, he's not my Mariners player to watch.
That's fine because he is mine. And why not? I mean, he slashed 220, 258, 399 for a 657 OPS and an 81 OPS plus last year. Now, why wouldn't you want a guy with a 258 OBP as your player to watch? Well, although he had a sub 400 slugging percentage, his X slugging was actually 470, which was 8 points higher than Manny Machado and 5 points lower than his Mariners teammate Julio Rodriguez, who you and I may or may not be talking about today. His 71 point difference in slugging and X slugging marked him as tied for the sixth unluckiest hitter in baseball, minimum 100 plate appearances. Dominic Canzone had a 31.2% fly ball rate and a 48.9% pull rate, which sounds great until you realize only 29.5% of his fly balls were pulled and 36.4% were hit to the opposite field. So, he did lose out on a lot of power by not pulling the ball, but I think it's something he could fix because when he did pull the fly balls, they went very far. If you look at his home runs from last year, he had some nice bat flips. He had some no doubters. He had one over 400, like off that little facade in right field at T-Mobile Park. He had a 12.1% barrel rate and a near 90 mile per hour average exit velocity in 2023. And he did especially well against four-seam fastballs. He hit 415 against four-seamers and slugged 878 with a 304 expected batting average and a 717 expected slugging. His 4.2 run value per 100 against four-seam fastballs ranked him tied for third among the 498 hitters with at least 25 plate appearances ending on four-seamers. He also ranked first in average, second in slugging to Nelson Velazquez, another player to watch of mine, second in WOBA with a 554, and 10th in expected slugging. Canzone was actually acquired in the Paul Sewald trade that the Mariners did last year at the deadline. And it got them a very interesting hitter, so I'm going with him as my player to watch.
Yeah, yeah, that is definitely something to look at. My my player to watch is one of their additions. Typically, not a prototypical guy that we would like have as a player to watch because we typically try to go for a younger, like kind of a younger guy who maybe hasn't proven himself yet. But I wanted to talk a little bit about Mitch Garver for my Mariners player to watch. I kind of found it hard to find like a sneaky guy on this list, so maybe this guy's a little bit more on the established side. But with Mitch Garver in 344 plate appearances last year for the Texas Rangers, he slashed 270, 370, 500 for an 870 OPS. And out of 293 hitters with 300 plus plate appearances last year, his on base percentage ranked 21st, walk rate ranked 31st, and slugging ranked 32nd, which is really, really good for a list of 293. It's near top 10% for all of them. Along with that, his barrel rate, walk rate, chase rate, expected WOBA, and expected slugging were all in the 80th percentile or higher last year, and his chase rate was in the 98th percentile, which helped him out with that walk rate ranking as high as it did. And yeah, like when we kind of heard that they were signing a catcher, it was kind of weird because like they have one of the best defensive catchers in baseball, but it's worth getting Mitch Garver based on his hitting alone, and I'm sure he's going to fill that DH role pretty nicely and fill in at catcher when he has to pretty nicely as well. So just a good overall addition from the Mariners, who did end up losing a lot of offense this offseason through Hernandez, Kelnick, and Suarez. But getting Mitch Garver does make up for a little bit of that. So yeah, now on to questions.
Yeah, so my question, last season the Mariners were tied for the major league lead with the Dodgers in pulled fly ball rate on a per batted ball basis. It was 8.5%. When you look at a lot of their additions, there are guys that tend to pull a lot of fly balls, Mitch Garver being one of them. Will the Mariners lead the majors in pulled fly ball rate on a per batted ball basis?
That was a good question. I never really evaluated Suarez, Kelnick, and Hernandez's.
Suarez hit a lot of fly balls to the opposite field, I believe.
Okay. Um,
Kelnick hit a lot straight away.
yeah, I don't recall any of them being
Jorge
particularly like,
Polanco pulls the ball a lot. It's the ball in the air a lot.
yeah. Yeah, Cal Raleigh's gonna carry that because he's
Mhm.
like one of the kings of that. Um, uh, so the question is, will they take that lead?
Will they lead the majors? They were tied for the lead with the Dodgers last year.
Yeah, I'll say they take that lead.
All
Sure.
right. All right.
I'll do that because yeah, I mean it's T-Mobile Park. I think it even it's pretty deep there, so you want to pull it in general. So I think that
Hmm.
it just attracts that type of play.
Yeah.
Um, so my question, oh yeah, this is a one of my more fun questions. Um, the StatCast era record for in zone percentage for seasons with 2,000 plus pitches thrown is 57.2%. Um,
Mm.
George Kirby was at 56.8% last year, which is zero point 0.4 percentage points below. Will he break that StatCast era record this year?
Who holds the Statcast era record?
I believe Phil Hughes, one of those.
That makes sense. It was it 2014?
Uh,
Or no, wait, Statcast era. No, duh.
I think it
No,
was
Phil Hughes was
2015.
okay. I remember Phil Hughes in 2014 had like a crazy low walk percentage.
Also, shout out to Cliff Lee for making it pretty much impossible for me to make it the pitch tracking error record because he
Yep.
stuffed the zone like
Yeah.
crazy. So,
Yeah.
George
In
Kirby, will
in
he will he get to the Statcast error record this year?
Yeah, I'm saying this to stall my actual answer, but in 2014, Phil Hughes put up a solid 11.63 strikeout to walk ratio due to his 168 strikeouts and 16 walks in 209 and two-thirds innings pitched. Um yeah, if it was 2014, I would imagine my answer would be no because I don't think anyone's beating that. Um George Kirby was point 0.4 off of it. Can he improve on that? I think he can. Will he? Ah, I don't know. Like anytime you see someone with like a remarkably low walk rate, it just feels so impossible to like improve on it. Like, I mean, he had point 0.9 walks per nine last year, which led the league. Um, 19 walks and 190 innings pitched. Did his walk rate like go up or down at any point throughout the season?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
Uh, he had multiple multi-walk starts in September. That is very concerning. Um, You know what? I'm gonna sell on it. I don't know. I think I want to buy it because it's very fun. That's just such a hard thing to do, though. I think he'll remain above 55% though.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, that is where we will that is where we will draw the line. I that is yeah, because yeah, he did improve on it, but yeah, I mean that's hard to do. I mean, a sub one walks per nine is just impossible.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, now on to the Texas Rangers, who last year went 90-72, finished second in the AL West, defeated the Rays in the AL Wild Card round, the Orioles in the ALDS, the Astros in the ALCS, and the Diamondbacks in the World Series for their first World Series in franchise history. As far as
Yeah.
additions and subtractions, they lost maybe Jordan Montgomery. He's still out there, but right now he is not on the Texas Rangers. They also lost Mitch Garver, as we just mentioned, Aroldis Chapman, Martin Perez, Robbie Grossman, Chris Stratton, Will Smith, and Austin Hedges, and they added Tyler Mahle, Kirby Yates, Andrew Kisner, uh, Austin Pruitt, David Robertson, Matt Duffy, and Jared Walsh. And on to, yeah, my player to watch. This one was also, I found it hard to find, sort of an under the radar guy, but I think this guy was getting more recognition in like the first half of the year, and because of everything that happened after that, he kind of got lost in the shuffle a little bit, but I wanted to acknowledge what Josh Young did last year and what he has the potential to do over time. Josh Young, he was a rookie last year. I think he finished fourth in rookie of the year voting because he had a little bit of an injury that held him back in playing time, and he actually didn't perform well after that in the regular season at least. Ticked it back up for the postseason, which was nice, but he ended up with a 266 batting average and 781 OPS, along with a 109 OPS plus in his rookie season. And then along with that, he was worth 6 outs above average on defense. What helped him, would help guide him to good offensive numbers was a very high average exit velocity and sweet spot rate. He had a 91.8 mile per hour average exit velocity and 42% sweet spot rate, which were 87th and 98th percentile, respectively. 25% of his batted balls were hard hit and in the sweet spot zone. And out of 169 hitters with 300 plus batted balls last year, his hard hit sweet spot percentage was seventh highest. He also had a 12% barrel rate, which was in the 77th percentile in baseball. As far as improvements, it's pretty obvious. He needs to walk more. He needs to strike out less. But he does have that already, batted ball potential already all the way there. So yeah, if those are improved upon, he can be an elite hitter. So yeah, who is your Rangers player to watch?
Yeah, it was also tough to find someone here, especially when someone goes on a deep postseason run. A lot of guys get very recognized, and my guy definitely did. This is probably one of the higher profile picks that I'm making, but I think a lot of people don't realize the magnitude of what Evan Carter did for the Rangers down the stretch. Between the regular season and the postseason, Evan Carter had a 16% chase rate. I need to understand how ridiculous a 16% chase rate is. Not to mention, in the regular season, it was 9%, which is the major league average is like 28%, and his was 9%, which was the lowest in the regular season. But throughout the regular season and postseason, it was 16.1%, the sixth lowest among the 403 hitters to see at least 300 pitches outside the zone in both the regular season and the playoffs. Thanks to that, he put up a 14.9% walk rate between the regular season and the postseason last year. Part of the reason I sold on Ryan Noda being 99th percentile walk rate because Evan Carter is probably going to qualify this year, and I could see him coming for that for sure. Not only that, but in the games he played, both in the regular season and postseason, he put up a 48.8% pull rate and a 33.8% line drive rate. He also put up 3.3 defensive runs above average in 23 regular season games. That is an insane rate. That is like top defender in the league type rate. It's only 23 games, but it's an accumulated stat. It's not a rate stat. So like that is kind of ridiculous. He also put up 3 outs above average in that time. So Defense loves him. He has 97th percentile sprint speed. He had a 38.8% sweet spot rate last year between the regular season and the playoffs. Do I think he'll repeat the same success? No. I mean, he had a 412 BABIP in the regular season. He had a 180 OPS plus in the regular season. I don't think he'll repeat that. But if he can maintain like a 115 to 120 OPS plus, he is already a very complete player, minus like maybe a lack of power. And I could see him putting up 4 to 5 wins this year and making a good run at Rookie of the Year. So Evan Carter, like for a guy that never played above AA, looked very seasoned in his cup of coffee with the Rangers that led them to a World Series title.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And that leads very well into my next question. Who will finish higher in the Rookie of the Year voting?
God.
Evan Carter or Wyatt Langford?
Dude, I have no idea, and I knew you were gonna ask this question. Because I also think Wyatt Langford is pretty nuts. Who will receive more votes between Evan Carter and Wyatt Langford? I'm gonna go with Carter. I don't know. I don't feel good about it. There's no answer I can feel confident in here, but I mean, I think, but it's weird because both of them are definitely not immune to the like struggle when you're first adjusting to big league pitching. Like you might see Carter and think like, well, he didn't need time to adjust. He's already like, no, he could, the league could still figure him out. What Langford's same thing. But seeing the way he's zipped through the minors has been good. Yeah, I'm gonna go with you know what? No, I'm gonna switch it. I'm gonna go with Langford. I'm gonna put in my final answer as Wyatt Langford. Even though I just put Carter as my player to watch, I'm gonna throw in Wyatt Langford in there.
All right, all right.
Yeah, final answer. Okay, I have a somewhat similar question. So, Fangraphs projects that the Rangers will have 3 of their top 4 organizational prospects in the opening day lineup between Evan Carter, Wyatt Langford, and Justin Fosco, who was their DH. He was one of the 2020 draft picks, as I believe he was their first round pick. Will the 3 of them put up a collective weighted runs created plus over or under 110?
Over under 110. Yeah, I mean, I share the optimism in Evan Carter. Because yeah, I had him, I think, as my number 4 left fielder, which, top 5 at the position will say a lot of things, but I don't have him in like my top 50 or anything. So, it's just left field was a weird position. Although, yeah, I have positive thoughts on Evan Carter along with Wyatt Langford. And it just seems like for whatever reason, like I think players are adjusting fairly well to major league pitching, maybe a little bit sooner than they used to. Um, and especially like the fact that if guys struggle, they might just go down, and that might help out the rest of the guys in this, collective thing. Um, but how would we measure that? The 3 of them getting would we measure
Like a
averages?
collective. No, like I think there's a way on Fangraphs you could just put 3 people in and get their combined like thing.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, I'll say over then.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll say over because yeah,
And if there's not, we'll just go based on vibes.
yeah, for sure, for sure. So
Just
yeah,
the way people used to determine weighted runs created plus.
that's correct, right? Yeah, that's why I think that's what won Joe Gordon his MVP
Yeah.
back in
There's
1942.
a there's like an old tweet from the Onion that was like old school baseball fans complain about the old days when they used to go to bars in the 80s to debate on who had the higher WAR between Mike Schmidt and Ricky Henderson.
So yeah, now moving on to the Houston Astros, who went 90 and 72 and won the American League West, defeated the Twins in the ALDS, and then lost to the Rangers in the ALCS. They lost Michael Brantley, Martin Maldonado, Phil Maton,
Aton.
um, and Ryan Stanek, and they added Josh Hader and Victor Caratini. Who's your Astros player to watch?
Yeah, my Astros player to watch. Wouldn't be surprised if there's a repeat here as well, because I think this is kind of the generic, interesting player to watch guy, and it's Yainer Diaz. I mean, he's moving on from Dusty Baker to Joe Espada. Martin Maldonado is now out of the organization, so he's going to get a lot more playing time this year, and it's going to be interesting to see. This is not even statistical, this is just anecdotal, but it's going to be interesting to see how he handles catching a pitching staff full time, because that's kind of the reason they kept Maldonado and his 60 weighted runs created plus behind the plate for so long. And there's a 70-point difference between them. So we're going to see how justified Dusty Baker was in that. But what we can't speak to statistically is that last year in 377 plate appearances, he put up a 128 OPS plus and ranked 92nd percentile in expected batting average with a 282 and 96th percentile in expected slugging with a 543. He excelled in almost every StatCast defensive aspect of catching. The only one that he struggled in was framing, but he was great with blocking. He was great with pop time. He was great with throwing guys out. Framing was a bit of a struggle, though, and that's probably the most important out of the four. But that's so, at least according to Fangraphs, it definitely is. From June 4th through the end of last season, he slashed 293, 320, 576 for an 896 OPS and a 141 weighted runs created plus, tied for the 18th highest among the 163 hitters with at least 300 plate appearances in that span. And in 2023, he was one of 10 hitters with 300 plus plate appearances, a 525 plus expected slugging, and a sub 20% K rate. And the other 9 to do so were Rafael Devers, Yordan Alvarez, Juan Soto, Bobby Witt Jr., Freddie Freeman, Corey Seager, Mookie Betts, Kyle Tucker, and Ronald Acuna Jr. Those are, a lot of hitters that are, I think every one of those guys are somewhere in our top 50, probably even better than that, definitely are. And Yainer Diaz is right there with them offensively. So it'll be interesting to see what he does in a full sample this year. And for that reason, he is my Astros player to watch.
Yeah, yeah, and this is going to be our third repeat of
I knew it.
the episode. I don't have too much on him. But yeah, like with it is always a major task with the Astros to find somebody that's under the radar, because of how much talent they do have, and it's like, okay, all right, the under the radar guy is like sometimes like the 12th best guy on the roster, but yeah, regarding Yainer Diaz, like this last year was his rookie year, and he was able to hit 282 with an 846 OPS and 377 plate appearances. And out of 245 hitters with 350 plus plate appearances last year, his OPS ranked 30th and slugging ranked 13th. An above average exit velocity, above average sweet spot rate, and above average barrel rate. And his expected batting average was in the 92nd percentile, and expected slugging was in the 96th percentile. So yeah, there's a lot of things to be excited about with Yainer Diaz, like, an upgrade over the previous, catching position, albeit they had some good defense over there, but that defense kind of vanished last year. So, and Yainer Diaz defensively was fairly average or even better than average last year, and better than average with blocking, I'm pretty sure. Not the best with framing, but I believe good with caught stealing above average. But I may have one of those two flip flop, but still, like, yeah, really, really good, and probably one of the new staples of the Astros lineup. Now on to questions.
Yeah. My question, will Yordan Alvarez have a slugging percentage over or under 600? Very simple.
Yordan Alvarez over under 600.
Yeah. He was, I believe, 613 in 2022, a little under in 2023, and he has a 588 career slugging percentage. So will he be over or under 600?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've kind of bought into Yordan Alvarez, generally speaking. He's, obviously a tremendous hitter, and I think he's, one of the best hitters in the game. And I think there's like, I think it might be him and Judge as like the best in the game on a at bat per at bat basis. I'm trying to look at like if there were any trends that might deter me from picking him above or below 600. Because because yeah, he also just always has a really good batted ball profile. I mean, his average exit velocity dipped last year, but I think that was naturally going to happen because he had a 95.2
Yeah, what do you
mile
mean he
per
didn't
hour.
average a hard hit ball?
Yeah, he averaged a hard hit ball in 2022. But yeah, still an 18% barrel rate last year. Also, keeping those strikeouts low, so that gives him more opportunities to, get on base and therefore improve his slugging percentage. Had a 626 expected slugging. Yeah, I'll say he gets over. I think he gets over
Let
his
me let
slugging.
me ask a follow-up question of that I just thought of on the spot. What slugging? So assuming Yordan Alvarez has a full season, let's put it at 575 plate appearances, maybe 600. What do you think his OPS needs to be for him to be an MVP favorite? Because defense is not a part of the equation with him. Base running isn't really a part of the equation with him. He's going to be going up against guys like Corey Seager, who plays a defensive specialty position. He'll be going up against Aaron Judge, who manages the outfield very well. What does Jordan need to do on offense to put himself just on hitting alone an MVP favorite?
Yeah, it's a good question. It tries to make me think of like who's the last guy to win, kind of based off his offense alone. I might have to think like Bryce Harper, and that was like I think he had a 1044 OPS, but he played some right field, and the competition wasn't too stiff. He had Soto there, and I personally think
Immediately, I thought of like Frank Thomas 94, but that was a much older example.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I'd say if withstanding that the uh that the offensive environment stays about the same and the league OPS is around 730. Um, I'll say like probably 1090. I'm not willing to go to 1100, but 1090 is I think where we probably need to be.
That's fair.
Um, but I can't predict the competition.
Hmm.
Um, that's just my estimation. Um, my Astros question. It revolves around someone who's not known for his offense. He had a 102 OPS plus in 2022 and a 95 OPS plus last year. Will Jeremy Pena have over under a 99.5 OPS plus?
I'm gonna take the under. I don't know. I think Jeremy Pena. I mean, he definitely peaked in the 2022 postseason, but I think he was playing over his head there. You got to remember who he was when he came in. He came in as Correa's replacement. He came in as a guy that we joked uh was going to be better than Correa for the first month of the season, and everyone was going to make their determinations there. Um, yeah, I mean, I think the start of 2022 and the 2022 postseason kind of inflated a lot of what people thought of him. Like he didn't even really end the 2022 season that spectacularly, if I remember correctly. So I'm gonna
Yeah,
go
the regular
under.
season.
Yeah,
Um,
hang on. Let me pull up from July through the end of the season in 2022. He had a 667 OPS.
mhm. Yeah,
So
yeah,
call
yeah.
that what you want. From
They will.
June through the end of the season, he had his 671 OPS. So, I mean, he's had like 3 good months in his career. One of them
Yeah,
just happened. They just happened to be like the most ideal months for like building a reputation,
that is
like
true.
a World Series run and your first 2 months in the majors after replacing a consensus top like 5 shortstop in the game.
Right, that is true. That is true. Yeah, so that shall.
I'm just being a hater today.
Yeah, no. Well,
Selling on Ryan Noda, selling on Jeremy Pena, and then selling on George Kirby.
I think I have noticed in years past, I tend to ask questions and you tend to go over a lot. So I think
I do.
I've built up a standard to where
Yeah.
I increase the standard a little bit.
Yeah, no, I'm just being a hater today.
Yeah, yeah, that's all good with me. I like to hop aboard that train. So now, yeah, out with the AL West preview. We have one division preview left to go. And we have and yeah, this is our second to last time talking about our ARR top 50. It's 20 through 11 today. If you want to check out who we have at 50 through 21. Check out the last 3 episodes of Above Replacement Radio. You know, the last 40 minutes or so. We have those lists, so check them out. Check out who we've already picked. But yeah, exciting stuff as we get down to the wire. Who is your number 20 on your top 50?
Yeah, so for my number 20, I'm going with a guy I believe you also haven't talked about. So we might be, if I'm correct, we might be kind of in similar standing on him. I'm talking about Austin Riley. Did you have him in your rankings last week?
I have yet to talk about him. Yeah.
You've yet to talk about Austin Riley, and I put him at number 20. Yeah, I had him as my number 2 third baseman in baseball, as did you. And he's been one of the more consistent performers now over the last couple of years, but I think he did really step it up last year. Um he plays interesting defense at third depending on what website you look at, because he's had universally one of the biggest discrepancies always between Fangraphs and Baseball Savant in terms of his defense. But he hits the ball very hard, very importantly. That's definitely the biggest part of his offense is he's high in terms of expected WOBA, all of the expected metrics, and all of the the hard hit metrics, whether it be exit velocity, barrel rate, hard hit rate. He's elite in all of those. He has a very good batted ball profile in terms of a high average in fly ball rate, around league average line drive rate, little below average ground ball rate, pretty even in terms of where he sprays the ball, but he does pull it more than anything else, which is good. I would like to see him hit fastballs a little bit better, but he does very well against secondary stuff, sinkers, and changeups, and also curveballs, most notably last year. And those have actually been pretty sustainable over the years. But yeah, I'm putting Austin Riley at 20. I think he has developed into a really good player, and going into age 27, it feels like there's still more to be seen.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, it's still very young and has already developed quite a reputation. My number 20 is a guy who we talked about a good bit in this episode, talking about Zack Wheeler, who's my number 2 pitcher on the starting pitchers list. And yeah, why I have him at that status is he's been extremely consistent on a peripheral basis. He's been 80th percentile or better in expected ERA each of the last 3 years, 88th percentile or better in average exit velocity each of the last 3 years, top 10 in strikeout minus walk rate in all 3 years of 2021, 2022, and 2023. And that's top 10 in strikeout minus walk rate among pitchers with 150 innings pitched. And he has also had, 150 or more innings each of the last 3 years. So he's been consistently putting out innings along with, having very good underlying numbers as well as good results. I mean, he had a 3.61 ERA last year, but I expect that to lower back down to normal. And yeah, over the last 3 years, a 3.08 ERA and 2.86 FIP. Really, really good stuff. And I think if maybe his like 2021 is probably the best year of his career. If that happened a little bit more recently, then maybe I would have had him a little bit higher. But yeah, who's your number 19?
Yeah, my number 19 is a guy that you did talk about last week. And it is reigning American League Cy Young winner Garrett Cole. A lot of people don't think as highly as Garrett Cole as I did right now, which is understandable. He did see a dip in strikeout rate. Last year it went down to only 27%, but regardless, like he gets so much out of his pitches. If you throw your four seam fastball 53% of the time and you get away with it, I have nothing but respect for that. And that's what Garrett Cole did last year. Opponents hit only 201 against his four seamer with a 332 slugging. Normally four seamers, if you throw them that often, they're going to get feasted on. And it really didn't happen for Garrett Cole last year. Not to mention, he also had, a 1.7 run value per 100 on a pitch that he threw almost 1,800 times. Like, that's kind of insane to me. That's not something you see a lot. A 29 run value in total on his four seamer. And not to mention, he also has two dominant breaking balls in terms of his secondary pitches, his slider and his curveball. Both saw very good results last year, a run value per 100 over one with nearly 400 pitches each, 683 for his slider, 396 for his curveball. He's still has a very diverse pitch mix in terms of things that work for him. He has a very diverse set of results that the pitches get him. Obviously his four seamer gets hit in the air. His slider actually gets hit on the ground quite a lot, and his curveball had a negative average launch angle last year. So he's in part a fly ball pitcher and in part a ground ball pitcher, and it works for him regardless of what he's doing. He was much better with the home runs last year. So I did put him at my number 19 for those reasons. And I know that there's a lot of people that might disagree with that. They might put him lower. Maybe even people put him higher. I know MLB Network put him in their top 10. I think 19 is a good middle ground between there, and that's where I stand on Garrett Cole right now.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. My number 19 is someone you've yet to talk about. It is Bobby Witt Jr. My number 4 shortstop on the list of the captains of the infield. Yeah, he really, really turned it up from July on last year. Had the 6th most F4 in baseball in that span. And of all the things, like there are a couple things maybe up in the air about him, but one thing that's not up in the air is his base running. I expect him to, no matter what he does in the field or at the plate, I expect that base running to be elite, like it has been over the past 2 years. And if he continues his great hitting and defensive success that he appeared to have with his outs above average, I think he will, I'll consider him a top 10 player. Like, I mean, what he did from July on with a 929 OPS with great defense and having, I think it was like 27 stolen bases in just half the year. That's pretty amazing. And like if he is able to continue to do that, like that is, a top echelon of players that you're talking about with Bobby Witt Jr. But we've only really seen him do this for 3 months, so that's why I'm not putting him, higher than 19. But who's your number 18?
Yeah, you went with your number 4 shortstop at number 19, and I'm going with my number 3 shortstop for number 18. Francisco Lindor comes in at 18 for me on this list. He made some pretty dramatic changes to his offensive profile last year, and in some ways, you could honestly argue that on a rate basis, it was one of the better offensive years of his career. It was definitely his best with the Mets, but his highest average exit velocity in any season was last year at 91.2 miles per hour. His sweet spot rate was the highest it's ever been in a full season at 35.8%. He's still striking out below 20% of the time. He's walking nearly 10% of the time, and his batted ball profile went through some big changes. Before last season, he had never had a ground ball rate below 40% in a non-2020 season, and it went down to 34.1% this year, an 8.4% drop from the previous year. And where did those go? It went to every single type of other batted ball. It went to fly balls, it went to line drives, it went to pop-ups, unfortunately, but a 4% gain in line drives, a 4% gain in fly balls, and also he started pulling the ball 6% more, 6.5% more. So all those things are going to make you a better player, and it certainly did for Francisco Lindor last year. Not to mention he's still an elite defender at short. He's still a very good base runner for them. He's very dynamic and has continued to get better in that big market in New York, and I still believe he can continue to keep that going, and maybe even continue to get better as he hits his 30s this year.
You're right, right. My number 18 is your number 24, Adley Rutschman, who, among all players since the start of 2022, before he even debuted, he is 14th among all of them in F4 over these last 2 years, and he is the only player over the last 2 years with a weighted runs created plus of at least 130 and 20 plus defensive runs above average. He has done it at the plate and behind the dish, at the dish and behind the dish, I guess you could say. Been a really good framer, good at getting guys out on the bases, and yeah, like he's really he's probably the most complete catcher in the game for sure. And along with that, he's also 90th percentile or higher in he was also 90th percentile last year or higher in strikeout rate, walk rate, whiff rate, expected batting average, and expected WOBA. So I mean, really, really complete player. And yeah, I have him 18th on this list. Who do you have number 17?
Yeah, number 17, I have a guy that you did talk about last week. I don't quite remember where you put him, But I'm talking about another Braves player. It is Matt Olson. Where did you have him last week?
22.
22. I have him at 17. So we are 5 slots apart for Matt Olson. Not bad. Uh, very, very good offensive year for him, and a lot of good reason to believe that it can not sustain itself to quite that level, but still as a premier hitter in baseball. He faced at least 300 four-seamers, sliders, sinkers, and changeups each, and he had a run value per 100 above 2 on all of them, which is stunning. That doesn't happen. To have 4 different pitch types where you have at least 2 RV 100 in that kind of sample size. And Matt Olson did that. Um, Obviously, he hit the ball in the air a lot more in his second year with the Braves, a 34.4% fly ball rate and up 6% from the previous year, which is excellent. He also dropped his pop up rate by 4%, which is like you don't see that very often. And, that's in part how you get a 54 home run season compared to a 34 home run season the previous year. Um, he obviously hit the ball very hard. He hit it in the air a lot. Didn't actually pull it that often, but luckily Matt Olson is powerful enough to just it doesn't really matter where he's hitting it. He's got the power to hit it out. He hit a lot of opposite field home runs, hit a lot of straightaway home runs, left center home runs as a left-handed batter, which was very impressive. Defense obviously dragging him down a little bit on this list. Base running very interesting because he's a good decision maker on the bases, but doesn't quite have the speed for it. But that's okay because he's a first baseman, so you can kind of forgive that. Doesn't chase a whole lot. And also, I would love to see a bit of an increase in sweet spot rate if possible, but definitely not. I mean, when you're hitting 54 home runs and putting up an OPS near 1,000, definitely not a guarantee. But I am putting Matt Olson in my number 17 spot.
Yeah, just yeah, excellent offensive year. And like it took, Freddie Freeman, Ronald Acuna Jr. and Mookie Betts having great seasons to keep him out of the MVP finalist mark. And yeah, I mean, almost 1,000 OPS. That's awesome. My number 17 is, I believe, your number 26, Marcus Semien, who yeah, he is a very, very complete player. Had a great defensive year along with, offense and or along with hitting and base running. He had 15 outs above average and 16 defensive runs saved last year, along with 2.5 BSR and a 122 OPS plus. And I typically evaluate players on a 2-year scale. And considering that, like, Marcus Semien didn't have the best, he wasn't the best version of himself in total in 2022, but he had a really, really bad, like, 2-month slump to start the year. And since then, since he broke out of that slump on June 5th, 2022, he is 5th among all players in F4. That is pretty phenomenal. So, like, pretty much over the last 10 months of baseball, he's been a top 5 player in terms of F4. I think why I don't have him ranked higher is, like, part of that has to do with just pure the fact that he just doesn't miss games, which I guess does have its own value. But like, if for some reason he drops to 135, 140 games, he just doesn't have as much value. And also, age is not necessarily on his side. And there's just a lot of players that have emerged over the last year that I have a lot of faith in. But still, like, he, there's nothing to like underestimate with what Marcus Semien can do, especially like he's pulling fly balls at a crazy high rate, resulted in 25 or 29 home runs last year. Yeah, he's a very complete player, and yeah, if he continues this, he's going to continue to get MVP votes, maybe even be an MVP finalist again. Who is your number 16?
Yeah, my number 16, you talked about him last week. It is Spencer Strider and my third Brave of the episode. Where did you have him last week?
27.
27, and I have him at 16. So quite a discrepancy there, actually, 11 spots. But um, Spencer Strider put up one of the best strikeout seasons that we've seen in recent years. I mean, a 36.8% strikeout rate as a starting pitcher with 186 and 2/3 innings. He was getting chases, he was getting whiffs, he was getting some weak contact, but I mean, very good expected batting averages. A 309 expected ERA, which very much did differentiate from his 386 ERA. Um, obviously I didn't know this until a couple weeks ago, but he is adding a curveball to his repertoire this year, which makes me feel a bit better about this pick for sure because he doesn't really seem to have like a designated right-hander's pitch. You know, he has his changeup that he threw 214 times to lefties and 11 times to righties. He threw his four-seamer more to lefties than he did to righties, and he did throw his slider more to righties and got excellent results on it. But I would love to see another his curveball in there and see if something else happens there. But yeah, I mean, one of the best strikeout artists in baseball, probably the best strikeout artist in terms of starting pitchers, for sure. I feel like there's going to be a lot better fortune on his side. Obviously, he was a guy that ran into some misfortune on the batted ball side. Like, I don't think a 40% sweet spot rate is going to happen again. I think that'll go down quite significantly. I feel pretty good about it. I think, with a lot better luck, he'll have a much better ERA and it'll much better reflect the pitcher that he is. So I'm putting Spencer Strider in my 16.
Yeah, yeah. My number 16 is a different Atlanta Brave. It's a guy you just talked about, Austin Riley, who over the last 2 years is 11th among all players in F4. He's just been really consistent since 2021, especially on the offensive side of the ball. It has resulted in him being 85th percentile or higher in expected WOBA and expected slugging each of the last 3 years. And that has helped him to a 134 OPS plus over the last 3 years, which paired with some fairly like average defense and base running, definitely makes him a really good player. And yeah, yeah, it's just someone you can rely upon for over 30 home runs, probably over 30 doubles while getting on base, at a 360 or so clip. That's really good. And I think he might have gotten, I'm not sure if he's been a 5-win player according to F4 each of the last 3 years, but I know he's been at least really close. So that is, that's tremendous value to have for on that consistent of a basis. Who is your number 15?
Yeah, so for my number 15, I believe another guy that you talked about last week, definitely a pick that I'm making more based on what I think his 2024 performance will be as opposed to his 2023 performance, and that's Fernando Tatis Jr. Obviously not the strongest season for him last year. Where did you have him again?
24.
24, so 9 spots apart on him. Um, yeah, it's certainly not the strongest season for him last year, but I do think that 2021 Fernando is very much still in there. The fact that he just casually moved to the outfield and became one of the best defensive outfielders in the game, both on outs above average, both on defensive runs saved, on arm strength, on arm value, on speed. Like the guy did literally everything out there, which was just stunning to me. One of the beautiful things about Fernando is that you're gonna look at his Savant page and think, oh, bad strikeout rate, bad whiffs, bad chase, and the reality is he actually improved on a lot of those things. His strikeout rate went down nearly 6% from 2021, which was his best career season so far. His whiff rate also dropped from 34.8% to 30.5%. His chase rate did go up a bit, but that's something that he hadn't seen live pitching in a while. I'm willing to forgive that a little bit more. The one thing that he struggled with is hitting pitches down the heart of the plate. He went from 24 heart runs in 2021 to 1 in 2023. So I think that's an easy thing to improve on. I think just with more pitching and more time without a huge break like he had in 2022, he can get back to that. And for that reason, I'm putting him in my 15 spot because he did still hit the ball hard last year.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of it was just a matter of ball placement. So yeah, my number 15, I think might be your number 27. Dansby Swanson that's 15 is where I put Dansby Swanson. Yeah, because he is the best defender in baseball, or at least he has been over the last 2 years. It's resulted in him being 6th among all players in F4 over the last 2 years. I think he had 6.4 in 2022 and 4.9 last year. First in defensive runs above average over this span and 19th in BSR. So along with that, he's a top 20 base runner. And then he's 10% above average at the plate, according to weighted runs created plus. And yeah, Dansby Swanson is definitely one of the weirder guys to evaluate, because when we're talking about pretty much all the guys in this list, or most of the guys in this top 20, we're talking about very good or even elite hitters. And Dansby Swanson doesn't fall in that category. I think his OPS has been in the 700s each of the last 3 years. But considering that he is probably the best defender in the game, and in order to justify my take, I tried to take a little bit of the eye test and look up defensive highlights, and it holds up. Like he does make the plays that most of the players in the game cannot make. And then add on to the fact that he is an above average hitter, a very good base runner, and also underperformed his expected metrics last year. That is a recipe for a really, really good baseball player. And yeah, so like someone who I think, just when you add everything together, that is a really good player, and that's why I have him in the top 15. Who is your number 14?
Yeah, my 14, I put a guy that had a down year in terms of results, but not necessarily in terms of everything that makes the results. I need to get your approval on this one. Is 14 an acceptable Jose Ramirez ranking for you?
Ooh, I mean it's acceptable. It's in the realm.
Okay. Yeah,
There were a lot of players that did better than him last year, so.
yeah, I'm sure you have him number one, and that's fine. But no, I don't think you have him number one. But I know you're the Jose Ramirez guy in this pod. I did end up putting him at 14. Yeah, I mean, you might look at his results last year and think, oh, like he only had an 831 OPS. He only put up a 123 OPS plus. His WAR went down a full win from the previous 2 years. Uh, and I think top 15 is still very appropriate for Jose Ramirez. He is still walking just as much as he strikes out. He's not swinging and missing it much. He's hitting it in the sweet spot a lot, playing good defense. He actually had a 90 mile per hour average exit velocity, over a 2% gain from the previous year. Actually had a better strikeout rate and a better walk rate from last year. Kept relatively the same batted ball profile, did hit a couple more line drives, struggled a little bit more on the secondary pitches, struggled against changeups, struggled against sliders, curveballs, hit fastballs pretty well, but not as well as he used to. But that's all on a results basis. His expected numbers were actually right on par with where they are usually. In fact, all of his expected numbers were much better last year than they were in 2022. So I think there's still good reason to keep Jose Ramirez high enough on this list, and 14 was that spot for me.
Yeah. So yeah, my number 14, I think, yeah, I'm not sure this will be acceptable for you. Definitely not Mike Petriello. If he heard about this, he'd probably shoot me. But my number 14 is Juan Soto, who is yeah, I mean, definitely, on a best hitter list, he's higher than 14. But we're talking about players here, so you know, great hitter, obviously great hitter, underline numbers wise, great hitter, in terms of strikeout and walk ratio. He's probably the best at that in all of baseball. But yeah, his in terms of offensive results, he's still at, a 153 OPS plus, which is obviously great, but it's not necessarily even the best when we're talking about players on this list over the last 2 years. I think Jose Altuve outdoes him in OPS plus over the last 2 years at 157. But so in saying that, and saying like, maybe he's not the best hitter, maybe in my mind he's like kind of fringe top five. And also his defense has been bad for the last 2 years, and it doesn't appear to be a fluke. It just seems that he's going to be like a defensive liability and also a base running liability that brings him out of the top 10. And in order for me to put him in the top 10, considering that defense and base running, he's got to be someone who I can rely on and be like, okay, he's definitely going to be top five in OPS. He's definitely going to be top five in OPS plus. He'll have like a OPS near 1,000. Like that's kind of what I would want him to do in order for me to consider him top 10. And I definitely think he has the potential to do that, and wouldn't be surprised if he does that this year. It's just we haven't seen that over the past couple of years. He had a 999 OPS in 2021. If that happened a little bit more recently, maybe I put him a little bit higher. But But yeah, that is my explanation for Juan Soto being 14th. I probably have him lower than most fans would, but nonetheless, that's where I have him. Who's your number 13?
Yeah, my number 13 is a guy that had a major breakout season last year, became a superstar caliber player, a face of the franchise for sure. Talking about Corbin Carroll, the American League or the National League, excuse me, Rookie of the Year. Obviously he had a tremendous season for the Diamondbacks, best base runner in the league, and one of the best base running seasons we've ever seen in terms of BSR. I believe he had 15.8 or something crazy like that. Um, 90 it oh 4 outs above average as a corner outfielder, which was solid. Both of our number one left fielders by a pretty comfortable margin. um it's interesting. I still feel like there's a lot for him to improve on offensively speaking. I mean, obviously his exit velocity I think is right around where it needs to be. I don't see him as like a guy averaging a hard hit ball, but that's fine. But I would love to see more line drives out of Corbin Carroll. His line drive rate was 23.3% last year. I would love to see that at like 26%. Ground ball rate, honestly, fine where it is. Fly ball rate, fine where it is. Maybe just less pop ups naturally. But let's talk about what he did on fastballs last year. Against four seamers, a 302 average of 577 slugging. Against sinkers, a 370 average, a 616 slugging. You're not supposed to slug against sinkers. You're supposed to hit ground balls. Corbin Carroll ignored that, and he had a 2.8 run value per 100 against sinkers last year in 87 plate appearances, ending on them. Obviously, not to mention the defense and base running. I got into them earlier. But he's only going into age 23. So, like, there is still a higher ceiling for him, I think, than what we saw last year. So, I'm putting him in my number 13 spot.
Right. Yep. Yep. Yeah, my number 13. This is probably our second biggest discrepancy here.
Yeah.
This is Jose Altuve,
Mm-hmm.
who you had at 38, I believe.
I did. I was looking over the guys that, you hadn't talked about last week, and I was like, Chris didn't talk about Marcus Simeon, and I was like, wait a minute, if you didn't talk about Marcus Simeon, he had Jose Altuve above him in his rankings. Where did he put Altuve?
Yeah, and I actually originally had Jose Altuve higher, but in sort of evaluating further and thinking about like, okay, yeah, it's not a list of what they've done over the last 2 years or over the past few years, but what they're going to do in 2024. I did sort of bring him down a little bit, but still, like, I do think he is a top 15 player because, like, I can't ignore what he has done over the last 2 years. Like, he is 12th in FWAR over the last 2 years, despite missing 72 games last year. He has 6.8 FWAR per 650 plate appearances. Like, that is MVP finalist level over a 2 year span and over a 231 game span pretty much. That has been because of a 160 weighted runs created plus and 157 OPS plus. Out of all hitters with 1,000+ plate appearances over the last 2 years, his on-base percentage ranks sixth, slugging ranks eighth, and OPS ranks sixth. I pulled him down a little bit from what I originally had him at because he's not been the same defender or base runner as he was, in his younger years. I'm not going to say like in his prime, but in his younger years, I think he was a better defender and base runner and just generally had more athleticism, stole more bases, got a higher extra base taken rate. Not necessarily at that level, but still his hitting has been really ridiculous. That being said, he did outperform his expected metrics a little bit more than normal last year. He typically does outperform his expected metrics, but he outperformed them by a larger rate than normal. I think his expected WOBA was like 60 points above his actual WOBA last year, whereas normally it's like 30. So mark that as like 30 points of luck going his way. Part of that had to do with him hitting 329 on ground balls last year. So I don't expect that to sustain itself, but he typically does do well on ground balls, but I'm not thinking he's going to be 329. I think it's going to be more like maybe 280, 290, which is better than normal. So I expect him to have like a 140, maybe 145 OPS plus next year. That would be down from what it was over the last 2 years, but this is a guy who is I think 30, 34, 35, or yeah, I think 34 or something like that. So yeah, I think that's naturally going to happen, but I still expect him to be a top 50 player if he, the reason why he was off the field last year also was because he got hit by a pitch in the World Baseball Classic, so that's not going to happen this year. There wasn't really anything lingering except for I think one hamstring or oblique issue had him out for like 2 weeks, which isn't that big of a deal. But yeah, that's why I got Jose Altuve at number 13. Who's your number 12?
Yeah, number 12. I'm very interested to see how we both feel about this guy. I felt like I was gonna put him in my top 10 when I started this list, and I ended up slotting him at 12. It's Julio Rodriguez of the Seattle Mariners. Didn't feel good doing it, but there were a couple things that I really just wanted to see more out of in his second year. Obviously, a tremendous rookie season where he had an 854 OPS and 509 slugging and won Rookie of the Year. Got a lot more playing time last year, 714 plate appearances to be exact, and didn't quite do the same things on a rate basis. Um, but some of the steps back he took outside of results did have me a little bit concerned. For one, the strikeout numbers did not really get much better. I was hoping that, over time they would decrease a little bit. His strikeout rate only went down 1.5% from 25.9% to 24.5%. His walk rate actually went down from 7.1% to 6.6%. And going into the more nitty gritty stuff, his chase rate went up by 4%, and his whiff rate only went down by 2.2%, excuse me. So that's why I put him outside the top 10. But let's talk him at number 12 because that's more important here. Julio Rodriguez is only 23 years old. There is still a lot of time for him to make these adjustments and then make himself a lot better at these things. He hit the ball at a 92.7 mile per hour average exit velocity last year, and at a hard hit rate of 52%. So, I mean, he hits the ball extremely hard. He had an 11.9% barrel rate, which is excellent. He had 12 outs above average in center field and a 96 percentile base running run value with 96 percentile sprint speed. So elite defender, elite base runner, and elite hitter. Just, I want to see a little bit more on the offensive side, specifically with walks, specifically with strikeouts, chasing, whiffing, and definitely a little bit more sweet spot because he did have a 31.8% sweet spot rate last year. But nonetheless, still an incredibly talented player, one of the best pure hitters in the league in terms of just like raw talent, with his power and whatnot. So Julio Rodriguez does go into my 12 spot. It was a very complicated process of ranking him for me, but I feel like this is where I stand right now on him.
Right, right. I mean, yeah, it's definitely a little bit harder to evaluate a guy who's only had 2 years in the league. Um, yeah, my number 12 is a guy who would be a lot more valuable most years, but this year not necessarily as much. But this is where I put Shohei Ohtani, um,
Ooh.
who yeah, and obvious put the
Yeah.
context alarm on. When he's a pitcher or when he's also a pitcher, he is the best,
Yes.
overwhelmingly the best
Yes. I
player
think
in the
I think
league.
we can both agree. Yeah, number one wouldn't even have to look at it in a year where he didn't just have Tommy John surgery.
Yes.
Or not Tommy John, but a separate elbow surgery.
This is a reminder that this is a projection for 2024. So so I have Shohei Ohtani 12th instead of number 1, where as if, if he pitched even 50 innings, I probably would have him number 1. But he's going to be pitching 0 innings this year. So yeah, I have him 12. And yeah, and that's because yeah, he's a DH when he's not pitching, although an amazing DH. It takes a lot to be a DH in the top 15. And last year was his best hitting season ever in his technically 6th year of Major League Baseball, but like, probably
Third full year.
like 3rd full year and 4th year where you could really
Yeah.
consider that a sort of a season or maybe even 5th
Four
year.
and a half.
Um, but
We'll count
regardless,
2019 as a half year.
yeah, exactly. Regardless, he led all of baseball in slugging and OPS last year, was 99th percentile in expected WOBA, expected slugging, and average exit velocity, and was 100th percentile in barrel rate. What has me excited about his hitting is he had a career high average exit velocity and a career low strikeout rate. Typically, you don't see that happen in the same season. Typically, strikeout rate, if you have a lower strikeout rate, maybe you sacrifice that average exit velocity a bit because you're swinging a little less hard and you're being a little bit more careful. But That was not the case with Shohei Ohtani. He was able to cut the strikeout rate while increasing how hard he was hitting the ball. The only reason why I don't have him higher is that was his first offensive season at that level where he was, leading in OPS and, leading in slugging and, and looking at that a crazy season like that where he could have, if he played the full season and was just a DH, he could have still, won MVP. But yeah, like I think the highest OPS plus he had in a season before that was 157, and last year he was at 184. So, if I'm projecting, maybe he's a 165 OPS plus guy who's only hitting. So that would have me as hit. That would peg him as a number 12 for me. But yeah, I mean, Shohei Ohtani is capable of a lot, clearly. So who is your number 11?
Yeah, my number 11 is your number 20. My number one starting pitcher, a guy we talked about earlier, getting an extension. It is Zack Wheeler. Yeah, I did put him just outside the top 10, which means I have no pitchers in the top 10 unless you count Shohei Ohtani, but we're not for this particular list. I do, spoiler alert, he is in my top 10. Um, yeah, I mean Zack Wheeler, normally I'm the type of guy that loves a ground ball pitcher, but if when you have an average exit velocity that's consistently in the mid to low 80s, you can give up as many fly balls as you want because a lot of them are not going to leave the yard, and that's exactly what Zack Wheeler has seen. It's still striking out guys at a consistent rate and walking guys at a consistent low rate. His strikeout to walk ratios were nearly identical last year. Strikeout rates were identical, walk rates 0.6% off between 2022 and 2023. He's the I love that he's a guy that throws three different kinds of fastballs as his three most commonly used pitches, his four seamer, sinker, and cutter, and then also a solid sweeper, a good curveball. And then we're not even going to talk about the changeup because he threw it 13 times last year. It's not even significant enough to talk about. But yeah, I mean, like I mentioned, good spraying in terms of around the field. Nothing stands out too much. Pulling the ball under 40% is always good. Obviously, the fly balls that he gives up are weak contact generally. He gets a lot of strikeouts. He has a very, diverse skill set in his repertoire. And yeah, I mean, there's really not a single aspect of pitching he didn't excel in last year and hasn't excelled in the last four seasons with the Phillies. Neither of us were too surprised to see the extension he got. The number was very big, but it makes sense when you break it down. So I have Zack Wheeler in my 11.
Right. Yep. Yep. So if you haven't, if you've yet to listen to starting pitcher rankings, don't worry about it. I will paint a picture for you. Um, Imagine a pitcher who over the last 4 years has never had his ERA eclipse 304 and FIP never eclipse 331. I want you to imagine a pitcher who over the last 2 years has a 2.50 ERA and 2.83 FIP. And out of 74 pitchers with 250 plus innings, is the only pitcher with an ERA and FIP both in the top three, and who in 2023 was a 91st percentile in average exit velocity, 97th percentile in expected ERA and barrel rate. So I want you to imagine that pitcher. Would that pitcher be someone worthy of a top 15, a fringe top 10 spot? You'd probably be
Definitely
like, yeah,
definitely top 46 for sure.
definitely top 46. And that pitcher is Max Fried, who you might be shocked to hear is at that level. 2.50 ERA, 2.83 FIP over the last 2 years. Pretty spectacular. It took Sandy Alcantara having a 2.28 ERA and 228 innings to outdo him for Cy Young. He was runner up in that race. So let's not forget about that. He is he's just a spectacular pitcher, and if you want more on that, go to the starting pitcher rankings. It's on YouTube. Go check that out. Yeah, that's my number 11.
Where did MLB Network have him?
I don't think it. Yeah, they didn't have him very high.
Because I mean, like 46 obviously seems very low when you put him at 11, but I feel like MLB Network thought even less of him.
Yeah. I, I'm I'm curious how the recording went with all those dings.
I didn't hear him, so
Okay, so if you didn't hear them, then I don't think they
yeah, I
transferred
just heard you
over.
say Jesus fucking Christ in the middle of nowhere.
It was it was very distracting.
Oh
But
wow,
I
MLB Network also had Jose Ramirez at 14. That's cool.
okay.
So we have six agreements in the top 10, which is honestly kind of low.
Yeah,
I think.
it's a bit low, but I don't think everyone has Bobby Witt Jr. in the top 10 and Juan Soto outside the
No,
top 10, so we have our
no.
own takes.
Yeah, I mean, I have Bobby Witt Jr. in my top 10.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm buying in this year for sure. Randy Rosarena.
Um yeah, I think you also have Mike Trout top 10,
Mhm.
which I don't.
Yeah, that's one way to put it.
Um
They put okay. Oh shit, they put Freed at 48.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
they're right with me on it.
yeah, yeah. But I'm happy to be alone, and
No,
I hope we
that's a good pick. The only reason I put him so far down was because he was hurt last year, and there's so many guys that did so well that I had to just like throw that too.
right.
But
Yeah,
I get
yeah.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, he was my Cy Young pick last year,
that's true. That's
and
true.
my first pitcher selected in the F4 draft.
Yeah, it's just a shame that
Yeah,
it couldn't
it's
couldn't
because
work.
it's because I drafted him. It happens every time.
Yeah. Yeah. That does it for this installment of Above Replacement Radio. We hope you enjoyed this one. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and want to watch the conversation as it happens, go to the YouTube channel. It's called Above Replacement Radio. Check out all the playlists and whatnot. Uh, Most recently, we had a guest interview with Stephen Schock of D1Baseball.com. Check that out on the guest interviews playlist. Also, check us out on social media. Follow me on Twitter at Chris_Giant. Follow Daniel on both Twitter and Instagram at Daniel_Current, and follow the show Instagram at Above Replacement Radio for all the show needs. We hope you enjoyed this one, and we hope to see you next time, where we will be talking the AL East and talking our top 10 players in all of baseball. We will see you then.